I'm with Seven Generations Ahead and the Zero Waste Schools Program Manager. And today joining me are my colleagues, Sarah, Rebecca, and Caroline, also with Seven Generations Ahead. And you'll be hearing from me and Sarah and me today about the work that we do in our Zero Waste Schools program. And then we'll also we'll be having a few people from McHenry County Environmental Defenders join us. Carrie Gassman, Cecilia Carmen, and then as well, Pamela is going to be joining us from McSEEP, which is the McHenry County Schools Environmental Education Program. Pamela Duncan King, she'll be sharing about her work in the schools. So just a little bit of background about Seven Generations Ahead. We work all over the Chicagoland area to build environmentally sustainable and healthy communities and we tackle the climate crisis with solutions that are bold, equitable, and just. We have a variety of programs in addition to the Zero Waste Schools program. We work in sustainable food systems, solar, sustainable planning for communities, youth advocacy, and we also run the Illinois Farm to School Network. And now I'll be sharing my screen, just a moment. So specifically at the Zero Waste Schools program, we empower Chicago area schools to reduce waste, fighting both the climate crisis and food insecurity by shifting operations and minds towards generating zero waste through source reduction, recycling, composting, and food recovery. We help schools plan effective waste reduction strategies. We provide on-the-ground support for operational changes, and we educate students and staff about the how and why of going zero waste. We also create a lot of resources and provide connections with local partners and things that are going on in the community, and work to drive policy changes at the state and the federal level. So when we work with schools, our two primary focuses are food and plastic waste. So first, we're going to address what schools can do to reduce food waste. And of course, before talking about solutions, we're just going to talk a little bit about why it's such a big issue that we need to address. So over 7 billion school meals are served each year in the US, and much of that food is going to landfills rather than nourishing students, while about 1 in 6 children in Illinois are food insecure. And methane is created when food decomposes in a landfill, and methane is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. So food sitting in a landfill is a huge contributor to climate change. And ReFed has estimated that uneaten food in K through 12 schools contributes to the equivalent of 2.89 million metric tons of CO2 back in 2019. So as we can imagine, the problem is even worse now. And wasting food also wastes the water and energy used in farming, processing, and transporting the food, as well as the money spent on landfill disposal costs and labor along the entire supply chain. So when working with schools, we use the zero waste hierarchy as a guide. Our goal is to minimize the waste that is produced as much as possible, and then we work to divert the waste by recycling and composting. So as you can see, source reduction is the highest priority up at the top in any waste management program, and it has the potential to decrease waste across all waste categories. So knowing what kind of waste and how much is being generated is an ideal way to identify where waste reduction efforts should be focused. They can help determine which waste reduction strategies will have the biggest impact. They establish a baseline to refer to after the strategies have been implemented by providing important data. And they're a great way to engage students and staff in the process. So here are some photos of waste audits that we've conducted at some different schools. As you can see here, this is just one bag. And if you look in there, a lot of that is perfectly edible fruits and vegetables. And that one bag is 16 pounds. But at this particular waste audit, we had many, many bags just like this. These are boats that were collected, and we counted them and weighed them so that we could identify, how much they were using every day. Again, another example of a waste audit. same waste audit. And then here they decided they wanted to collect and count how many straws they were using every day. So here's a diagram of the waste audit setup that can be used as reference when planning your own. And we also have a waste audit guide available for download on our website, and we'll be providing that information afterwards. So it's got all of the steps you need to conduct a waste audit at your school, as well as all of the data sheets to log your information. And cafeteria kitchen waste audits can audit any type of category you'd like, but typically we do liquid waste, recyclable items, fruit and vegetable scraps, other food scraps, landfill, and then share table eligible items. But as you can see in this audit, we decided to separate out the straws and utensils as well. So here are some audit results for one of the schools that we've worked with. And as you can see, they had a lot of landfill waste, and we pulled out again the straws, forks, and boats, and that had quite an impact on their waste generation. So that might be something that they would like to address when they see that that is such a large portion of their landfill waste. And these waste audit results can give a clearer picture of where a school is generating the most waste. So they are super helpful in determining kind of where you might want to target your strategies. So now I'll share some of the ways that schools can prevent and reduce waste. So adjusting schedules to allow more time for lunch is a very helpful way to ensure that students can actually eat their lunch. The way the food is prepared and served can greatly impact food waste generation. And of course, using share tables and measuring and tracking food behind and back of the house in the kitchen can impact waste generation. Specifically, with respect to food service and kitchens, looking at what should be included in your food service vendor contracts, making sustainable choices for foodware, including reusable foodware, and recycling and composting are other ways to prevent and minimize waste. So one of the easiest and most impactful ways that we have found to reduce food waste is to use the offer versus serve, or OVS method, which is how I'll be referring to it. It's for schools in the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. Students in schools without an OVS policy would receive a lunch tray with all 5 food components. But under OVS, students are allowed to decline up to 2 of those items. They just have to take a fruit or a vegetable. All groups must be offered 1 cup of milk, but they do not, under OVS, students do not have to take a milk. They may decline it, again, as long as they're taking 3 of the 5 items offered. Offer versus serve is optional in elementary and middle schools, but it is required in all high schools. So here are some examples of school service lines that use offer versus serve. Signage is very important to remind students what they do and don't have to take. Make sure your signs provide clear guidance and are placed in a visible spot at the beginning of the serving line. So here's a lovely salad bar, giving students choice. Another salad bar. This is most likely a high school. And then here is the video that I mentioned that's a nice overview, an understandable overview of how offer versus serve works. And it is a longer video that we will be sharing the link to later, but we're just doing the very end clip, which didn't work. So I'm going to back up again, see if it works. There we go.
Now let's review. Number 1, choose a main dish. And number 2, choose a half cup of fruits or vegetables from the salad bar. Remember, that's all we need to take.
Then only choose milk if you want to drink it.
And only choose more fruits or vegetables if you want to eat them. Now all this talk about food is making me hungry. Let's go eat responsibly.
And remember to love food, not waste.
So thanks again to San Diego Unified School District for creating that fantastic video. And we just love that it features students and is very clear and concise information. And then there's a lot of training and education available for offer versus serve, as well as share tables. We've created an educational video for students, as well as a training guide for staff. So there's definitely no need to reinvent the wheel. And there's a lot of information from the USDA, as well as the Illinois State Board of Education. And if you're in another state, I'm guessing that your Board of Education has their own materials to train and educate staff on offer versus serve and share tables. So now Sarah Zaharoff, my colleague, is going to be sharing more about food waste reduction, and then she'll be getting into the issues with plastics and what you can do in your school to reduce plastics. Sarah?
Thanks, Becky. I am so excited to talk with you about share tables today. A share table doesn't have to be a table. It could be a crate or a bin like you see in this photo. But a share table is a place where students can place items from the school lunch, unopened factory sealed items or whole fruit that they didn't eat. So some acceptable items include packaged cereal, closed milk cartons that haven't been opened, and a banana or an orange or an apple. Share tables can't accept foods that are in open containers, like those baggies of vegetables that some schools have with the thin plastic. And unfortunately, food from home can't be put on a share table. So when you're starting a share table at your school, the first thing you want to do is talk with your local health department. And then depending on your local health codes, you can determine what to do with the food that ends up on a share table. There are kind of two main pathways. A two-way share table means that food can be taken by other students during the same meal period. So students can go and put their unopened factory sealed food on a share table. They can also go and take it. A lot of kids love taking like an extra chocolate milk or a piece of fruit. A one-way share table means that students can put food on the table, but they can't take items off of it. So you're still rescuing food from the landfill, but it's not going back to students during that lunch period. Surplus food that's left on the table in either scenario can be used in multiple ways. So it can be used in future reimbursable meals. It could be redistributed within the school. For example, if you have a backpack program or a nurse's office that distributes food. Or the food could be donated to a food pantry or other outside organization that accepts food. So you might have a lot of questions about how do we do that? How do we keep the food safe? And that's why 7 Generations Ahead has created a share table toolkit to help schools get started with share tables. It's posted on our website and it includes a bunch of items to help you get started. Again, the first stop is your local health department. But then what we have in our toolkit is we have a standard operating procedure. Again, it's an example that you could adapt for your situation. And that's actually a really key component to making sure that schools will actually use a share table. We also have action steps. So the first few things you need to do to get started. We have training materials and videos for both staff and parent volunteers who might be helping monitor a share table. And we have education materials for students to help them get used to the idea of a share table. And we even have some games and things so they could practice with like what goes on a share table and what can't. We also have a list of policy references. So if you're in a position where you're trying to get other people on board with a share table and you want to show that this is in fact legal and encouraged, we have those resources to support you. There's often confusion about whether or not milk can be collected on a share table, as well as whether or not it can be reserviced in a future meal. And the answer to both of those questions is yes. We've created a sign to post as a reminder that milk is not a requirement for students. There it is. Students should only take milk if they plan on drinking it, otherwise it leads to a lot of waste. It's important that water be available for students, so students have a choice of what they can drink. We're also going to include a link here, there it is, to the USDA guidance on the reimbursement process for recovered milk and other meal components. So there actually is a plan in place from the USDA to be able to reuse milk. There are many governmental entities that support and encourage food recovery and redistribution, such as USDA and the Illinois State Board of Education. And we've included links on this slideshow that you'll be able to access when we send these materials to you after the webinar, if you want to click on them to read and learn more about the background for share tables.
Sarah, do you want to point out the unused food share plan in Illinois specifically?
Sure. Actually, I feel like maybe Becky, you should speak to that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So as you can see, so there was an unused food share plan passed in Illinois a couple years ago. And it says that all schools must have a plan as for what to do with unused food. Of course, still unused, meaning edible food, again, sealed or whole fruit, that how it should be dealt with, and that it should be used within the school. And there needs to be a plan written into their local wellness policy. So there is information on the Illinois State Board of Education's website. And again, we can share that link about how to do that. There's a template about how to write that information into your wellness plan. So that would basically mean how do you write a share table and operating a share table into your wellness plan. And they highlight, they really like the food to stay within the school, and so that it can get to students who need it before actually potentially donating to an outside organization.
Thanks, Becky. I also want to add that share tables are just really fun for students and an easy way for them to get hands-on experience with both keeping food out of landfills, but also sharing with the community and meeting potentially a community need. So we're going to move on to talking about plastics, because in addition to food waste, schools generate a huge amount of single-use plastic waste at lunchtime. About half of all plastic produced is used once and then thrown away by design. The US generates the most plastic waste of any country in the world, 42 million metric tons per year. And while you may know that, you might not know that plastics used in schools are often in contact with the food that students eat. And as many of you know, certain chemicals found in plastics that are used for food service are harmful to human health, and children are especially vulnerable to these adverse health effects. For example, some schools heat food in plastic. This is an example of the plastic waste generated in one lunchroom in a single school day. That's a lot of plastic. Here's some more examples of the large amount of plastics that schools use. Gotta love those spork packets. And there are millions of polystyrene trays, sporks, straws, and clamshells that are generated by K-12 schools every day. We have some recommendations of easy ways to reduce the use of single-use plastics. And also, these are changes that you can make once, and then your school can just make once and be done and not have to keep up with it. So you could switch to refillable squeeze bottles or bulk dispensers instead of those condiment packets. You could replace single-use utensils with reusable utensils. And you could use napkin dispensers, again, instead of those single-use plastic bags filled with napkins. You could also hold a plastic-free lunch day, and that's a great way to get started reducing single-use plastics throughout your whole school or district. So another way to reduce waste is to consider your foodware and your procurement choices. Reusable foodware is the most sustainable option, but that may not be an option for some schools due to space constraints or finances. So if you can, go for it. Get washable trays and washable silverware and washable cups if you have a dishwasher. The next best choice is PFAS-free compostable foodware. And using compostable trays will have the most beneficial impact if they're actually composted. So we know some districts who use those trays, but actually don't have composting. So obviously if you can compost, that would be great. Those trays can't be recycled because of their fibrous nature. And additionally, food soiled materials are not accepted for recycling. So, yeah. Milk and milk cartons are a huge source of waste in schools. Using bulk milk dispensers can save up to 248 gallons of water and 30 pounds of CO2 per student each year. So to understand the impact of switching to bulk dispensers and what that impact would be for a single school, a middle school in rural Marion County, Oregon, saw their average milk waste decrease from 250 gallons to 43 gallons of liquid milk over the course of a single year. That's an 83% decrease. On the opposite side of the country, at Bluestone Elementary School in Virginia, annual packaging waste dropped by 91%. If you're interested in trying out bulk milk dispensers for your school, there's a grant available that includes dispensers and cups, and we'll drop that link to the grant in the chat. Just so you know, the deadline for that grant is June 27th. Students who bring a lunch from home can also help reduce plastic waste. Putting up a poster like this one in your lunchroom or including it in messages home will remind families that they're part of the solution, even if they're packing a lunch each day. And that can also help reduce single-use plastics. As we mentioned at the beginning, waste reduction and prevention are the preferred methods to deal with waste, but we still need to manage the waste that we do create. And that's why 7 Generations Ahead works on implementing zero waste lunchrooms. There we create sorting stations, and this is what a typical sorting station would look like, with a share table and separate bins for collecting liquids, recycling, landfill trash, and food scraps and tray stacking. Keep in mind that commercial composting isn't available everywhere. If it isn't, you can still have a share table, separate your liquids, recycle, and stack trays, and that will make a big difference. And stacking trays is beneficial whether they're being composted or not. If they're being composted, you put them in the compost bag when you're done. And if they're not, you can put them in the garbage, but they'll still take up less space in the garbage. And that means less bags of garbage for your custodians to take out. So Becky earlier talked about doing a waste audit at schools. So here are the waste audit results from one K-5 school that implemented a zero waste lunchroom. So at their baseline audit, when they just had a regular day, they had 94% of their materials sent to landfills. Only 6% of materials were recycled. On the day they launched the Zero Waste Schools program, 89% of materials were composted, recycled, or otherwise diverted from landfills. So previously, the school was generating 25 bags of trash a day. And after the Zero Waste launch, they went down to just 2 bags a day. So 7 Generations Ahead, in partnership with the Wasted Food Action Alliance, created a food waste reduction toolkit for Illinois schools to provide guidance to schools to take action to reduce wasted food. This is developed for Illinois schools, but like most of it could be used in other places as well. It's a comprehensive resource that includes inspirational case studies of schools, easy to use strategies, and links to lots of resources that you can start using right away. Again, this will be sent after our webinar, but these are some more resources that are linked here, so you'll be able to access them later. And we've included grants that can help support some of the initiatives that we've talked about today, including the grant for bulk milk dispensers. Thanks so much for listening. Please reach out to 7 Generations Ahead if you have any questions about setting up a zero waste lunchroom or would like guidance with any of the things we discussed today. Next up, we'll hear from Carrie Gassman, Cecilia Carmen, and Pamela Duncan King, who will talk about their work in the McHenry County Schools of Illinois.
Great, thank you so much, both Becky and Sarah. When I was first learning about the problem that's food waste, I feel like I was just going into a Google search and finding case studies from other states, and seemed like an overwhelming amount of information, and I didn't know where to start. And just a few years later, it's so exciting and encouraging to see these toolkits where everything's kind of compacted together in one great place. And especially for us in Illinois, and even in McHenry County, we now have the health department support in utilizing share tables. So it's really exciting and encouraging to see some of the positive changes that are taking place. So I'm going to go ahead and go to share my screen here. So my name's Carrie Gassman, and I joined the Environmental Defenders about 3 years ago. It was in 2001, my son went to kindergarten. So I took a job as in a neighboring school district as a lunchroom and playground supervisor. So if you've ever been in a school lunchroom before, you know there's a lot of food wasted. And I'm sure you know that kids wouldn't eat all of their vegetables. Sorry, I can wait to go to share my screen for a moment. Sorry. I knew that kids weren't going to eat all of their vegetables, but I was shocked to see how much untouched and unopened foods were going in the trash. Many times as I was helping students open their lunch items, they would say, no, I don't really want that. So, well, what do we do with it? So I started to ask around. Has anyone ever noticed how much food is wasted here in the lunchrooms? And people would say things like, I know, isn't it terrible? But yet no one was doing anything about it. One day I counted 40 unopened juice boxes tossed in the bins. And this was just in one lunch period, not the whole day, one lunch. Sorry, now I can go back to sharing my screen here. So this photo here is showing some items that we collected in just one lunch period. So I went and asked administration table as an example if I could collect the items and donate them to the food pantry. They said, well, the school's a business and there's some liabilities there we have to be concerned with. So no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. So I got home, I kind of fell down this rabbit hole and started Googling and researching and learning all about food waste. Well, it turns out there is liability protection already in place with the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. And that was passed way back in 1996, but not many people really seem to know about it, and I still couldn't get anyone to listen. So every day I came to work and it seemed like the problem just was getting worse. But I realized it was getting worse. It was just that I was paying closer attention to it. And it was something that everyone else seemed to be turning a blind eye to. But my eyes were opened to it, and I learned it's a global problem, and I kind of became consumed with it. I learned that a whopping 40% of food produced in the United States is wasted. And all that food goes into the landfills, rotting, creating methane gas, like Becky already shared with us. But it's not just the cost of food that gets wasted when you think about all the resources that go into producing the food, packaging it, transporting it. It's kind of mind-boggling. Everyone talks about our carbon emissions and our carbon footprint, but really, I think eliminating food waste is probably the easiest way we can reduce global warming. People say, well, school waste is just a drop in the bucket, right? It won't make that much of a difference. But there are about 7 billion school meals served each year. And if schools make up 3% of all the food waste in the United States, that 3% reduction in food waste could be driven nationwide. That would be the equivalent of taking 12,400 passenger vehicles off the road for 1 year. I also hear things like, well, our area is quite affluent. There's not that much of a need, is there? But if 1 in 7 people are food insecure, I looked up in District 47 alone, for example, has 7,500 students enrolled in the free or reduced lunch program. So there definitely is a need for us to take action in our area. Where I feel most passionate is that we're failing to teach our kids that food is a valuable resource. We teach our kids the nutritional value of food, but then we train them to treat it as trash when they're not provided any alternative in the lunchroom. I asked my son, why don't you keep your leftover lunch items and bring them home for an afternoon snack? But at school, he was told he has to throw them away because his recess was right after lunch and students couldn't go back to their lockers or their classrooms. He was so upset. He knew it was wasteful. He knew it was wrong, but without any share table, he didn't have any other option but a trash can. Well, you might think, won't it be hard to get kids to make changes to their lunchtime routine? But I think if we start young in elementary school, students are good little soldiers. They stand in their line and they do what we tell them to do. So using share tables or maybe sorting trash, it could become just second nature to them. And they would carry these healthy habits with them all through school and maybe even bring some of those habits home with them. The share table at the school where I worked, I just used a little red bin from the dollar store. I started asking kids, would you like me to help you open your apple slices? Or would you maybe like to donate them to the share table? It didn't take long for kids to start dropping their unwanted items in the red bin all on their own. Several of my coworkers, they went on to be in food service in other District 47 schools. They took what I was then calling Too Good for Trash initiative along with them, which means they just kind of talked to their school administrators and said, hey, my friend at another school was trying to collect some items. Is that something we could try here? So they started their own share tables. Uneaten foods could be taken by students who were still hungry. At Lundahl, for example, 6th graders, they donated the most during their first lunch period. And then all the hungry 8th graders came in and ate most of it up during the last lunch. We learned that cut up fruits get eaten a lot more often than whole fruit, especially in elementary schools where students have wiggly teeth and are slower eaters. We found that 30% more carrots get eaten if served with the option of taking ranch dressing, a really simple change to make. The kitchen staff also implemented offer versus serve, so kids were only taking the foods that they actually wanted to eat. They also took a look at what items were being donated the most and were able to modify which foods were on the menu. So here are just a few observations from 2022. At that time, I was picking up leftover foods from 3 schools and delivering them to the food pantry myself. So when we first started, this was a one-way share table. So meaning students were only donating foods that at this time they weren't utilizing offer versus serve. They were just handed their tray with food and they had to take those items. At Canterbury School, there were about 80 items per day, and at Lundahl, around 100. So if you think that there's 180 school days, those numbers really add up. So again, looking at just these 2 schools in District 47, that's over 32,000 items that were potentially being collected every single day. If you think that there's about 5 items per meal, you could see that that's over 6,000 meals every single day. Again, I want to point out, this is just 2 schools in District 47. Imagine the impact that it could have across all 13 schools in District 47. Imagine the impact it could have across all of the schools in McHenry County. Kind of amazing, right? So as you can see, small changes, they really have a big impact. So what's your why? What's the reason that you can get behind making a change in your school? Is it the money that could be saved? Or do you want to take action against climate change and fight the negative environmental impacts that schools are making when they produce so much food waste? Or is it that you can see that it's silly to be filling trash bins with healthy, edible food when there are hungry stomachs that would be happy to have it? Or do you agree that we could do a better job educating our kids? We need to teach them. Food is a valuable resource. Food is simply too good for trash. Or if you like me, you might find passion in all of these. I was never much of an environmental person before this, and it was a school lunchroom that opened my eyes. And now I've joined the fight against food waste. I'm so thankful I'm not the only one in this fight. Seven Generations Ahead has partnered with several organizations, like they pointed out, this amazing toolkit for Illinois schools. And everything you need to know is right there. There's links to documents like the Bill Emerson Food Donation Act, instructions on how to start a share table, signs you can print for your lunchrooms, tools to educate students and staff. I kind of feel like they did all that hard work for me. And I know it seems like a lot of information, but please don't be overwhelmed. Yes, food waste is a big problem. But as we've discussed today, big problems are solved by taking small steps. So I encourage you, find your why, implement just one or two small changes for this upcoming school year. And no, you don't have to do it alone. Reach out to 7 Generations Ahead and our Environmental Defenders Waste Reduction Team, and we would absolutely love to partner with you to implement some impactful changes in your schools. So thank you so much for listening. Next up, yeah, we have Cecilia. She'll share some work that our team has done this year as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for such a great presentation. As she said, my name is Cecilia Carmen, and I am the co-chair for the Waste Reduction Team for the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County. And one thing I just really want to point out about, well, Carrie's done such amazing work. And like she said, she was one person who made huge impact in our community. It doesn't take a whole team to do major changes. It was one person standing up and saying, excuse me, what is going on? And that's what we've seen at other schools as well. It doesn't take a whole team. It takes that one parent, that one teacher to go to the principal and say, can we make a change? And it's just doing that ask. And as you can see here today, you are not alone. She started on her own, met the defenders, started coming to our meetings. We backed her up. We did the waste audits for her. We all volunteered. We're there at the schools. We've reached out to the schools. We've done seminars with the schools and meetings. So you can feel like you might start off alone, but if you take those extra steps, you can see there's a lot of people behind you. And yes, we've been very lucky that we've been able to work with the health department. We have connected with the Board of Health, and to make this more of a community effort. So I just encourage you, if you are that parent or that one teacher at that school, yes, just make that phone call to your principal and like, hey, can we make these small changes and see how they can make big impacts on our community. We've also done some teachings on recycling, composting at the schools, but our main education program that is through what we call MCEEP. It's the McHenry County School Education Program, and it's a vital part of the Defenders. And they do amazing education programs that they can present to any school here in McHenry County. And Pamela King is the executive director, and I'm going to have her discuss what she has done in the schools and the impact that it's made in our area.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen really quick, and I do promise to be fast. So my name is Pamela King. I am the director of the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County. And we've been around since 1987, but not always with the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County is our financial sponsor, our fiscal sponsor. But we've been around since 1987. And so when we started, we actually started with recycling and trying to reduce plastic waste and everything else back in 1987. It's come a long way since then. We have developed a pre-K to 8 curriculum that we deliver throughout the county. Both public and private schools, all the schools have to reach out to us, and that's what's happening. We start with recycling. We do start with why it's important. Our program is very interactive. Our students generally have a lot of hands-on experiences within there. Again, we start with students as young as pre-K, having them figure out how the world works and how the environment works with this. We go all the way up through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, where we're looking at the watershed, climate disruptions. Actually, in that particular unit, we do talk a lot with the 7th graders about food waste, as well as with our 2nd graders, because our curriculum is integrated throughout all of those grades. We do come back to those topics, even though we may be in a school only once a year. It's surprising how much they remember. We deal with energy and how all of that comes about. So that's our primary function, is we go into schools with experienced environmental educators, and we bring materials that the schools may not be able to. For example, the Enviroscape model there on the left, the schools, that would be a very expensive proposition for schools to only use for 1 or 2 lessons, but we have the equipment, we bring it all in. We do also do other things. We are definitely active within McHenry County at various events like Planet Palooza and the Green Expo. We offer environmental education to teachers. So people who want to learn more about how to incorporate this in their environment. We are always at Earth Day and a whole bunch of other things, bringing bits and pieces of our curriculum. This is part of our composting curriculum, where we learn about worms and how they help with the whole composting process. And our big event of the year is the Groundwater Festival, which we have 6th grade students. This is sort of like our poster child for the whole event. But we have 6th grade students that are learning about how to preserve water and everything in the environment. So I do want to thank Zero Waste Schools for reaching out. And the other things that we can do is we have a lot of the materials you would need for a zero waste lunch recycling that we can make available to people. Just so you understand our impact, we serve 10,000 students during the 23-24 school year. I'm very proud of that, except that that's only about half the schools in McHenry County. The pandemic really hurt us. We're trying to get back into those schools where we can support all of these initiatives. I like to think of us as a clearinghouse for a lot of things, where we can reach out to schools because we are in them. So these are just some districts and schools that we had going on this year. And Briargate's been with us since the beginning. I have to do a shout out to Briargate. And so we serve 24 different schools in 18 different districts. And my contact information, if you're interested in our programs, as well as the Zero Waste Schools, we would love to see you. But I do sort of want to end with this. We only preserve what we love. We only love what we truly understand. We only understand what we learn. We're here for a very short amount of time, and our future is in these classrooms. There are children, there are grandchildren, and if we want them to help, we really need to be reaching out to all students and giving them the things that Carrie was talking about, with thinking about, wow, this is food, we can do so much. It is the end thing that we do in all of our lessons, is what is that one thing that you've learned today that will go out and make the world a better place? I would like to thank everyone for listening to me. I know at the end, everybody gets tired, and now I just got to figure out how to stop my share. Come on, Mouse.
Oh, thanks so much, Pam. What a great way to wrap everything up. I love those sentiments, feel the exact same way. And thank you, Carrie and Cecilia, for your insights as well. We have some wonderful questions in the chat, but first I would be remiss if I didn't thank and mention the Full Circle Foundation, who they are located in McHenry County, and they are kind of behind our work with the environmental defenders. We partner with the defenders on this grant that makes all of this work in McHenry County possible, as well as our other funders, Peoples and North Shore Gas, as well as the USDA, who supports our broader scope of work and allows us to create all of these fantastic resources for everybody's use. So we really appreciate their support. Let's see, we'll jump in. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If we don't get to all of them, we are definitely going to follow up with the answers. We attended, some of us at SGA, we attended a webinar a couple weeks ago, and they responded, they did a follow-up with very thorough answers to the Q&A, which we thought was super, super helpful. So we would like to do that as well. So I'm gonna jump in and look at the chat, or if Rebecca or Caroline wants to let us know anything that jumps out to them that we should answer. Happy to do that.
We can start from one of the first questions about plastic clamshells in the lunchroom in the school cafeteria. If anyone has any insight on how to reduce their use in the lunchroom. I know Becky, Sarah and I have worked on getting plastic out of the lunchroom as much as we can.
Anybody want to address that? We can look at it. It's a really tricky thing to tackle. We always start with kind of looking at what is it being used to serve, and then what are the other options out there to avoid it? Can you serve that food directly on a tray instead? We kind of always go to that first. Does it have to be individually packaged, or is there a different type of product that they could use? Is there a paper product, a compostable product? Of course, we would ideally be using reusables, as Sarah mentioned, if you have the infrastructure to do that. If not, looking at what PFAS-free compostable, again, that's a chemical that is has been very common in compostable products. They're starting to move away from that. And if you look for BPI certified containers, those do not have the PFAS chemical in them. So we would look for BPI certified compostable foodware. And also that's what generally the composting processors accept. So I know that isn't super helpful, but just moving away from plastic as much as possible, looking first, how can you minimize the use? And then how can you at least come up with a better replacement? And talking to your food service manager is the best place to start. And also galvanizing students and other interested parties. The more people they hear from, the more they understand that this is something that's important to the community, the more they'll be more likely to listen if there's a lot of support behind those efforts. Anything else? What else do you see, Rebecca? Or yeah, Rebecca said, feel free to unmute and ask your question. Just raise your hand. We could do it that way as well. Not a huge group. I can just look at the bottom. We see from Kara, do you see this interest effort carrying on to the middle schools and high schools in your districts? That's a great question. We work at SGA, we work with schools K-12, but we tend to get kind of more interest and more support in the K through 5, or even Chicago Public Schools actually is kind of unique in that most of their elementaries are K through 8. So we do have the opportunity to work with the middle school level, which is really great. But definitely elementary school students are a little bit more open to change and they get more excited about these efforts. So we've definitely had more traction in elementary schools, but we have worked with middle schools and high schools as well. And there are different types of projects that really work for those older grades. Like the waste audits are a really great way to engage those middle school and high school students. They can kind of take charge, or they can work, their environmental clubs can work on it, or in their science classes. So having them kind of take ownership of the project, and then doing some sort of roadmap. So do that waste audit, and then kind of pinpoint where I showed, the specific results of how many spork packets and straws and all of that. So have them help identify what projects they would like to work on. So kind of put it more in their hands, give them more choice as to what they'd like to work on. let's see. Again, if anybody wants to speak up, please feel free, or I can continue looking at the chat.
We have a question about bulk milk dispensers. Someone asked, schools that have implemented bulk milk dispensers or condiment dispensers, do students fill their own cups? How do you ensure that they're getting the proper amount?
Yeah, the students do fill their own cups. That's kind of the point. I think maybe we've talked to some people where maybe in kindergarten and first they had some staff helping them, at least at the beginning as they adjusted to it. But definitely the students, it is self-serve. There is education that, that definitely needs to happen at, kind of at all grade levels. And I see Sarah wants to join in. And I was just going to mention, as far as the serving size, the cups, you can purchase cups that are actually the exact serving size that you need. Or with this grant, I think that the cups, it's the Chef Ann Foundation grant. I think the cups do come with it and they are the correct size. Sarah, what did you want to contribute?
I was just gonna say, I worked at a school where we actually just did a little Sharpie line on the outside to indicate like the right portion for the milk and to make sure the kids didn't fill it to the top and then spill it all over.
Yeah, but there are case studies out there as well about schools who have implemented dispensers and kind of very detailed results and data about how much milk and carton waste they've been able to avoid, and then also just kind of the procedural aspects.
I see that Abby had asked an interesting question about how long should waste audits continue after the launch and what the frequency is. They were discussing purchasing scales for their district for multiple schools. So that would be good information to share.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. We've been in schools that kind of get overwhelmed, like when we launch the commercial composting and recycling, and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to do this every day. We have to weigh, and no, you don't have to do it every day. There was a school that we launched that they actually took it upon themselves to do it every day for at least 2 weeks. And then they got so burnt out. Like when we found out they were doing that, like, no, you don't have to do that. The ideal is obviously the first day. And then it's really up to you at what intervals. It is ideal to do it over time. It's, maybe once a month or every 6 months, just to see to gauge your progress, especially if you're going to start implementing other waste reduction initiatives in addition to the composting and recycling. You want to see what impact those initiatives have, and also that will help you determine if they're being implemented properly. Like if you do an audit and you said you wanted to eliminate some certain type of plastic, but you're still seeing that plastic in the landfill, that's going to tell you need to kind of revisit that. But I would say, maybe do it after a month and then again after 6 months. But it really is up to you and what kind of volunteer support you have or student support you have to implement those waste audits. Because it's a little bit of work. It's not a huge amount of work, but it's definitely not something you'd want to do every day.
And I just wanted to kind of jump in with a waste audit. I think that's a step that people often skip past. But where it's so impactful is I was sharing, I didn't even really know this problem existed until I was working in a school lunchroom. This is a way for everyone's eyes to be opened to it. Students just kind of empty their trays into the garbage. The custodians put them in the dumpster. No one's really thinking about the specifics of what's going into them. But when you're able to sort out all of these unopened juice boxes, foods that could be donated or reused, it really is kind of jaw dropping. And you start to think like, wait a minute, this is every single day that we're doing this. It just kind of, that visual is really, really powerful. And that's something that our team is kind of excited to go in and to schools and help with these waste audits, because it's fun for us to see other people's eyes be open to it. And that's a lot of the work that we do. So reaching out to us to get help with those audits is something that we can support your schools into.
Yeah, and speaking of the visuals, definitely when you do a waste audit, take a lot of photos. So it's great to have the data, but and also as far as the data goes, the spreadsheet, the log that we provide in our waste audit guide, you can actually generate those pie charts. So having that as a visual is very helpful, but having those photos is incredibly impactful, because you could say we have 50 milks left, but when you see 50 milks, you're like, whoa, that's crazy. And that's information that can be shared to make the case to the food service director or to the principal or to the superintendent or whomever you're trying to kind of bring on board to implement share tables or offer versus serve or whatever it is. I saw an interesting question about stacking compostable trays. This is something that has not been on our radar, about getting feedback about if the trays are stacked. Let's see, where is that question? It's way up there. If the trays are stacked, then it doesn't allow oxygen to circulate, and therefore doesn't allow them to properly decompose and break down. What our experience has been, we have, from the haulers who work directly, with the processors, we haven't gotten that feedback that things should not be stacked. I think they would prefer that they be stacked, because if they have all of the trays kind of just randomly placed, that volume increases exponentially. So not only it's a bigger cost for the schools, because they're going to fill up so many more toters or dumpsters. And then it's a lot more for the hauler to take away to the facility. My guess is, and this is something, thank you for bringing this up, because we will definitely look into this. My guess is at the facility, they are being separated. And I know that the facilities we work with, they have these, big machines that that grind everything up, and then it's going to be aerated, and it's mixed with yard waste and food waste. So the trays do not stay compacted in the long run. And there's also, the bioplastic, the cups and all of the other foodware that you might have at events where you have like hundreds of cups, and those are going to be stacked. In any environment I've been in where there's large volumes of foodware that's being composted, those items are always stacked, because otherwise that volume would just be unmanageable. But I appreciate you bringing up that point, and we're definitely going to look into that a little further, as far as the aeration and how those products actually get separated at the facility. I know we are past time. If there are any burning questions, we're more than happy to answer them now. If not, we really appreciate you joining us. And we're so happy that so many people showed up in the middle, during their summer breaks. And we'll follow up. I know there were questions that we didn't get to in the chat, so we'll definitely follow up with answers to those. But again, we're happy to stay on a few more minutes and answer questions if anybody just wants to speak up. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon. We'll hang out for questions or to chat or say goodbye.